Welcome to Backyard Oasis, a podcast designed by and for older adults living in the beautiful Pioneer Valley of Western Massachusetts and produced in the tech studios at Greenfield Community College in Greenfield, Massachusetts. Backyard Oasis reaches out to older adults who seek knowledge to help them live more thoughtfully, healthily, and happily, who hope to inspire others with their ideas, and who serve their communities in the interest of the greater good. Hi, this is Dennis Lee. I'm calling this episode of Backyard Oasis, Have Microphones Will Travel. I'll explain why I said that. My guest today is David Murphy. He's traveled around the world making sure people could be heard during many events broadcast on television. David, today I know you're in the real estate business, but we're not going to give you a plug about your business. Instead, we're going to talk about other things you've done, and you've done a bunch. You've been all over the place with microphones and getting the sound out for a long time. How did you get into this?
Well, I as a high school student, I built all my own stereo equipment. I built the amplifier, soldered the circuit boards, and installed everything, wired it all together. I was always really fascinated by sound and sound reinforcement, and one thing led to another. I just even started out shooting 16 millimeter film, which was the only way you could shoot remote stuff in the day. Actually started out with black and white photography, and then went over to 16 millimeter film because that was more interesting. And then that had sound, so I got into sound. Actually, probably the biggest thing that got me into sound was at our alma mater, Emerson College. As a freshman in their television program, I auditioned to be a director. And the teaching assistant at the end of my audition said, "Well, you did a really excellent job, but freshmen aren't directors. We're going to make you an audio person." And that's how I wound up an audio person, and I really took to it.
But then you got into doing stuff for PBS and local TV. That's really what got you into it.
I worked in Springfield for WGBY when it was actually functioning as a real television station. I don't think it is anymore, but it was at the time. And they moved. They had been at the Springfield Armory in the Arsenal building when they first started, but they got a building in the corner of Hamden and West Columbus Avenue in Springfield, and I wired the two TV studios there for sound, installed the boards, and wired the whole control room up, everything. And then from there, pretty much once I got done getting it all installed, it started getting less interesting. So then I went off to do freelance work for any number of sports entities. Most of what I did was sports.
Now, did you get involved, though, with the fundraising at PBS and putting it the TV? Did you do the audio for that?
Yeah, we did the audio for their pledge breaks. The one thing that was the most fun was when they used to do an auction, and that was like the thing went for 6 or 8 hours. It was live. It was multiple locations for sound. Tables where they had merchandise and wireless microphones and intercoms. I think that's something people don't think about. But on a relatively large sports broadcast, the guy that's doing the sound is also doing the intercoms. And there'll be 6 to 8 channels of intercom going to different participants. There's a channel for the producer, there's a channel for director, there's a channel for the statisticians, there's a channel for the tape operators and the audio people. And this stuff goes all over the place. You're responsible to make that work, too.
Well, the reason I thought it would be interesting, I'm interested in it because I was in the radio biz, but I didn't have you on because of that. I just think it's really fascinating. Now, you don't even get a credit when you're doing all the stuff you've done. People don't even know you, but yet you're so responsible for doing so many sports.
Yeah, it's interesting. In your world, they heard you. In my world, they weren't supposed to hear or see me. If they did, something went terribly wrong. Right. We're there doing our thing, but we're not. Nobody's supposed to know we're there.
Right. Now let's talk about. You've done a whole bunch of sports. Let's talk about. Give me an overview at first. the things you've done, then we'll go back and get more specific.
Mm-hmm. Oh, different. You mean the different sports I've
Yeah,
done?
yeah. Give us an idea of what you've done. Where have you been? We'll go back and talk about specific events, but start somewhere.
Well, we'll start with basketball. I did every home Celtic game from 1985 until Kevin McHale retired in the early, like 92 or 3 or around there somewhere, which was a lot of basketball games. And basketball is a relatively easy thing to do because it's indoors, so you don't have to worry about the weather. The court's a specific size because you have to mic. People want to hear the swish of the ball going through the net. There's a little ECM mic right up by the net. They want to hear the sneakers squeaking and the ball bouncing when they go up and down the floor. They want to hear there's microphones under the basket so you can hear the guys grunting and groaning and banging into each other and saying some unpleasant things that you probably didn't want to hear. But to me, my job was to make you feel at home like you were really there. And with the pictures, the pictures are the pictures, but if you feel like you're sitting in the second row because the sound is bringing you all the court sounds and the players and so on, it really makes you feel like you're there.
So you did basketball, and then what else?
Well, if I would run through things, I did a ton of basketball, both Celtics and college ball. I did football, NFL, for a whole bunch of years. I did a little bit of Ivy League football, too, which is really interesting. But, no, I did NFL. For NBC, I did football. I've done beach volleyball. And then Olympics. So in the Olympics, I did boxing. I did indoor volleyball. I've done weightlifting, whitewater canoeing, BMX biking, more basketball, lots of men and women's Olympic basketball. Grand Prix horse events where they, jump over water things and, all kinds of stuff like that. Baseball, let's not forget baseball. I did a lot of baseball. Baseball is the hardest sport to televise, not for a sound guy, but for a camera guy, because until the ball and the bat meet, you don't know where the play is going to be. And everything matters in baseball. The pitch count, where people are on base, is one of those guys fast? Can he steal? Sound, not so bad. You get a bat crack. You got gloves at first and third for throws. We usually even mic the bullpen, so the catcher's mitt out there, so you could hear, the guy was warming up, you could hear the catcher's mitt out there. But a lot of baseball as well. I mean, tennis, did a lot of tennis.
Now, so you've done stuff at Fenway.
Boxing? Yeah, Fenway. Been to Fenway.
I know you've been, we're talking before about basketball. I know you've done UMass basketball.
Oh, yeah.
At the Mullins Center. I know that. You've been at Fenway. I was talking to you the other day, and I said, did you ever go to Yankee Stadium? And you said you did.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's pretty exciting stuff. Probably not the 15th time you did it, but I would imagine the first time you walk into those venues, it's pretty special.
Well, I got to be honest, Dennis. Very seldom did I walk into the venue because my office was one of those big, 48-foot trucks parked outside. So I was in my control room out there, and my assistants wired the stadium and set up where the announcers were. So very seldom did I actually leave the comfortable confines of my room with all my sound equipment in it.
Right. What is the toughest sport to do of all the ones you've done and where you've been? And we'll talk about the Olympics later, which is a whole other thing, I think.
Yeah, probably the toughest one for a sound person that I've done, like in general for a sound person, like doing a marathon is a real pain in the neck. You got a 26-mile course, and you never know where things are going to happen. I've done golf. Golf is hard because of the size of the facility. You got to mic every tee box. You got to mic every hole. You got to have mics on the fairway in the vicinity of where these guys are going to be hitting because you want to hear the club swing. Sometimes you cheat and put the club swing on a digicart.
David, please.
But the other thing,
I'm so shocked, David.
But the other thing about what's people should know about golf is most of it is off a tape. Very little of it is live because there are golfers golfing all over the course, and they're recording them. And you set it up, when you set up golf as an audio guy, you put the mic for the tee box camera on the camera router button. So when a tape guy is pre-recording somebody teeing off, on hole 11, when they're recording that, they're getting that tee mic. So someplace in the next 5 minutes or so, the announcers will say, let's go see Jim, tee off on 11. Well, it's coming off videotape. It's not live. And as they jump around the course following this one or that one, you don't know what's on tape. And they're not telling you. They're saying, we're going to see this guy hit here and this guy putt here and so on and so on. A lot of that is off tape, which makes it very challenging because you're tracking the effect side of that tape to hear the club swing or hear the putt, but it's coming off tape. And the announcers just call it like it's live. And the announcers are whispering when somebody's putting. They're on the other side of the golf course in a trailer. So they're listening, Frank is putting on 14. They're a mile away in a trailer somewhere. Right. They're not anywhere near there.
Right. How many people, how big are the crews for like baseball, football? For let's say a Red Sox game, how many people would be on your crew?
It isn't a national game because I did a bunch of ESPN Thursday Night Baseball going into the playoffs, and those are national games, so there are more people. But typically, a typical run-of-the-mill Nesson game is probably got 5 cameras.
Right.
And so there are 5 camera guys. There's usually 3
and
tape
how many
operators.
Mics? How many mics at a game?
At a game? Well, there's mics to get the back crack behind the catcher. There's a mic on first and third to get the glove sound of the throw to those people. As I mentioned earlier, we usually mic the catcher's position in the dugouts, so if you go to somebody warming up, you can hear the ball hit the glove in the dugout. And it's usually quieter out there, so it's not as hard to get it there. Trying to get the catcher's mitt behind home plate, is tough because it's not like the fans aren't screaming. So it's kind of hard to get rid of the background noise and get just the,
right.
Use big shotgun mics for that.
Now, I don't remember exactly what game it was, but it seems to me you said if you never saw another hockey game, you would be happy because you had a marathon event.
Oh, I forgot to talk about hockey. I kind of blocked out hockey. I think it was 87. I think it was 87, 86 or 87. The Bruins were in the Stanley Cup with the Edmonton Oilers, and we did a triple overtime game at the old Boston Garden. And I was doing the national feed here at the time was with Sports Channel America, and we went on the air at 7 o'clock. And we did not go off the air till like 1:30 in the morning. And the guy that's mixing it, I can't leave. And with hockey, every intermission is a talk show. So you play a period, and then you go to the studio and talk to somebody from Canada for a while, and then you play another period, and then you go back and do another talk show. So you're either mixing hockey or doing an interview. You're on the air constantly. We were on the air constantly from 7 until 1:30 in the morning.
So if you never did another hockey game, you'd be thrilled.
No, believe me, I had to finish off some that year, but I never did after that season. I never did any more hockey. And and remember, all this stuff is live. You can't make a mistake because it's live. It's gone. And it's kind of interesting to have the whole country on your console. You stop thinking about it after a while. But it's really, you cannot make a mistake because it's noticeable immediately when you make a mistake.
Right. And nobody knows your name, but they know somebody made a mistake.
Well, usually, fly through some credits at the end. But let me tell you, at 1:30 in the morning after being on air since 7 o'clock, you're really not really concerned about getting a credit for that. You just because you got another hour to take everything down before you can drive home from Boston. So that's a long day. And given the rights for hockey, there's a national U.S. show, and then there's Nesson as the local show for the Bruins. Then The Canadians, God bless their soul, they do everything twice because they do it in French and in English. And each of them has to have their own equivalent mobile unit. So there's us, there's Nesson, there are 2 Canadians, and then there's the local Canadian station for Edmonton Oilers. So they have to block off Old Causeway Street by the Garden. They'd block off one whole side of it to park all these TV trucks. And there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them blocking the whole road. And everybody, audio-wise, is sharing stuff. Like, Nesson, because they're there all the time, they were the host. But we were taking effects mic splits off of Nesson's and feeding it to like 5 other TV trucks. So everybody's sort of interconnected for like ice sounds. Right. But everybody has their own studio and their own announcers, and then there's 5 sets of announcers calling the game at the same time.
I find it fascinating because I've never been a TV person. Maybe I did a telethon or something, but the old line, I've got a good face for radio. But anyway, in radio, the guy, for the most part, is doing his own thing. He talks. A lot of times you're running something, but it's amazing in TV. People don't think about this, but you have not that you think of it as power, but you can make somebody look bad or sound bad, and the talent is really at your mercy. If you hit a wrong button or the cameraman does something, they look terrible. It's just they're really out there, and they really need really good crew people, and I hope they appreciate what you did. I'm sure they did.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, but I think the toughest thing. You can be a technically very proficient audio guy. The hardest thing about doing live TV is keeping track. You almost have to be ADD to be good at it, because you have to keep track of so many different things. You have to listen to the game you're mixing, but you also have a speaker, the producer and director on a big show. They have hot mics, so you hear them all the time. They're just on a speaker box. So you're doing your show, you're mixing your show, and you're listening to the producer and the director all the time. And you're listening to the audio channel on your intercom if you need something from one of your field audio guys. And you're mixing your thing. So you got to listen to all this stuff at the same time. And sometimes, the voices in your head are conflicting with what they're talking about doing. Or sometimes they just forget to cue you at all. So you just have to sort of wing it and go, well, this is what I think they want to do. Because the producers and directors are very focused on video. They're not focused on audio at all. They don't talk to us a lot because they want this picture, that picture. They want to roll in a replay of this or of that. The only time they'll talk to us in football, if they're doing a replay and somebody got creamed and you can hear like his spine coming disconnected, and it's on, and we got it, they'll roll it at real speed and say track 2 on for the effects channel or something like that. But most of the time, they never say anything. It's left to you. When the announcers at the beginning of the game are doing their stand-ups, talking about what's coming up in the game tonight, they're usually standing with a hoop in the background. Nobody tells you to crack the mic a little bit so you can hear the balls going in to the hoop that's in the background of the. They never think of that. I'm sure the producer and director never noticed you did it, but it's pretty cool.
Well, that's what experience is, because you've done all that, so you know what's expected, and you just do it. Mm-hmm. And they hire you because they think you're good at doing it, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things I was going to talk about, which is not related to actually setting up the mics, but I'm going to the Mullins Center when UMass was playing there. I would go over with the play-by-play guy, a guy by the name of Mark Vandermeer, who I worked with on the radio, but he now is the voice of the Houston Texans football team. Mm-hmm. And a wonderful guy and a talented guy. Mm-hmm. But we would get over there early. And to me, one of the most fascinating things, you'd go into an empty building when you got there really early, and then the excitement, people come in and you could feel the tension in the arena. It was really an amazing place to be, and then the game started. Mm-hmm. But when you went in, it was just an empty brick building. So it was really fascinating to see mm-hmm. the place come alive.
Well, you can't. nobody's going to appreciate this at home, but you're talking about UMass. This is the production memo for a CBS UMass game I did in the day, and this is my office. That's where I worked.
Well, since this is radio, as you said, people can't appreciate
you
it.
Can see it, but you brought up UMass, and I want to say that's the amount of crap I have to. Amount of gear I have to keep track of.
Right.
You know?
It's an amazing. It's an amazing console. I mean, what is it? About 8 feet long?
Yeah, I think it's a 48 track.
A lot of buttons.
I think your engineer's interested in checking that out.
Yeah,
it's a low light photo, so it's
Alex
not really
is our
great,
engineer. We have,
but that's
he
that
would love that. Yeah,
that's what and actually the production memo you're holding is for that. That truck was used for the game that you have the CBS production memo for, and that truck, by the way, belongs to somebody that we know, because Pat Sullivan, who used to own the Patriots, started Game Creek Video, and that's one of Pat Sullivan's trucks. So they formerly owned the Patriots. When they got rid of the Patriots, Pat started Game Creek Video, and that's one of his trucks. And that truck has probably been crushed into Toyotas now, because that was like 99, I think, 1999. So I can't remember if that console was digital or not. But in 99, 2000, the consoles all started going digital, and we started to do football with surround sound, because the 1999 I was doing CBS football. I had a digital console for the first time, Euphonics, I think it was. It was a digital console, and we were all terrified because if the thing took a power hit, it went stupid, and you had to reboot the whole console. Now it would come back up the way, an analog console, you lose power. I mean, not the hockey game I was complaining about, but another hockey game I was doing at the Boston Garden for CBC French, a Canadian show, and it was the can't remember the console that it was, but we're in the fourth quarter. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm a tall guy, and I lean back, stretch out, and the power supply for the console, I have really long legs, was underneath there where your feet would be. And I shut the stupid thing off. And the last thing I heard as the console went down was the French producer saying something really nasty in French about and it's dark in there, so I'm crawling around on the floor trying to figure out where the switch is for this thing. Wow. But it was an analog console, so when I turned it back on, it came up just the way it was. Yeah. It just came back on again. But
I want to switch gears and talk about the Olympics, because that's got to be an incredible experience. Your crew won a couple of Emmys doing sound for the Olympics. So where have you been in doing the Olympics? Which Olympics did you do?
Well, I got it up front. I was not a sound guy for the Olympics. I was a technical manager for the Olympics. So I actually ran the crew worked for me. That was my crew doing the shows. But I started off in Sydney, Australia in 2000, because I've been doing football for NBC throughout the 90s. So when they got the Olympics, the first Olympics they did was 2000. We went to Sydney. And I did boxing was my main show with Marv Albert. Marv was there. Marv was the announcer for that. And so I did basketball, but I also did indoor volleyball and weightlifting. Those were my three shows. And Greco-Roman wrestling was also going out of the compound we were. So I had three shows to do, and then they did the wrestling. And then where else have I been? I've been to London. I did boxing again in London. And after London, Olympic boxing was just a little bit corrupt, so NBC didn't really spend a lot more time on boxing. And after that, I just did basketball. In Brazil, I did women's basketball, whitewater canoeing, and BMX biking. They were all in the same place. And what was your favorite Olympics to cover? I mean, I know the first one would be the interesting, but what do you remember? It's kind of the city. Australia is a wonderful place to go. We flew home on 2 chartered Qantas planes, and the engineers were all sitting together. And one of the engineers goes, I'm going to tell my wife it was terrible here. So when I disappear, she won't think to look for me in Australia. That was great. Australia was wonderful. London was also good. London was great. We stayed in a good place on Canary Wharf, and we were in the XL Center, that big, giant, huge building.
What are the special problems of doing the Olympics? Is it different than doing the other things that you've done?
The security is really, I mean, I brought you.
Once again, this is not TV. I appreciate it, but
this is what you wear around your neck.
Yes, well,
with you're barcoded, and you have all that stuff on you to get here, get there, and everywhere. So it's very cumbersome to move around that Olympic venue because you're constantly getting checked out. I had problems. I had to get notes because at the time I had a new hip, and they mag and bag everywhere. You're constantly going through metal detectors. So I had to get a description in Brazilian Portuguese or in Japanese. I'm going to beep the machine. Here's why the machine's beeping, because it wasn't a problem. The British, though, the British mag and bags for where I was doing boxing was manned by British soldiers, and they're all very jolly guys. We had a great time, but they had a tariff. Every time we went through, they wanted a different Olympic pin, because pin collecting at the Olympics is big time. And so you put your bag through, and of course it beeps because it's got all kind of stuff in it. And you see these people every day, and they go through your bag. I think there's contraband in here. What are these? Olympic pins. Well, we're going to have to take one of these and check it out. Every day, a different pin.
Now, do you have some Olympic pins yourself?
Oh, yeah, I have some Olympic pins. I don't have any with me, but...
Do you have a prized possession, Olympic pin?
No, pins get kind of old after a while. There's enough pins. Some of them are really clever, but when my position as a technical manager, they give me a bag of pins. They give me a bag of NBC Olympic baseball caps. They give me, some polo jerseys that say NBC Sports Olympics. Is sort of the unofficial currency of I need a favor for somebody. We need a favor. Well, there's a hat in it for you, and OBS, the Olympic Broadcasting Service, they're the host broadcaster at every event. So NBC had some of its old cameras, but we also took some of their cameras. And we'd have a handheld camera that shot players, run down the hallway in the locker room and high-fiving and everything. Well, you'd say, why don't I have the mic on the camera? I get the camera, but I want to hear the guys when they go by high-fiving. Oh, well, you didn't order that. Well, what would it take to get that? Well, that's a special order thing now. We'll have to work on that.
How does it work with bringing all of that equipment going to the Olympics? Do you bring everything from the United States, or do they rent things there? How does it work?
A lot of it, yeah. For NBC, most of it comes from here in flight packs. So we would have an empty office trailer, and we'd have all these rolling cases we'd plug in together, and it all goes back on fiber, and it's so fast on fiber. I'd see it leaving, and on my desk was the return, and there was almost no delay. I mean, it's that fast with fiber.
Wow. I want to give you a chance before we wrap up. I don't know if this is fitting or proper, but I'm going to give you a chance to name drop. You've worked with a lot of people that people would know. They don't know you, but the people you worked for were around you, and they needed you, and you worked for them.
Yeah, I mean, the only people, because most of the time I was with technicians, they'd probably know the announcers that I worked with. Yep. But when most of the time you're in a 40-foot truck a long way away, you don't get to meet them. But in football, one of my favorite years in football, I was following Don Cricky and Beasley Reese around. And they were, Beasley Reese was funny. He, at the time, was the sports guy at Channel 30. So Bees and I flew a lot together because we both flew from Hartford. So a lot of times we'd be on the same plane flights. He was a good guy. Marv Albert was a good guy to work with. Boxing was Lampley.
Jim Lampley.
Yeah, yep. George Foreman. George was a wonderful man. I did a lot with George. And Larry Merchant. was the other guy
Boxing,
from there.
right?
Yeah. In fact, I was at Madison Square Garden. We did the Bo Galata fight. There was actually a riot, and I was ringside for that with the announcers. And the riot got out of hand, but it really didn't bother us because we had George. So George just sort of stood up, and nobody came near us because George was there. And in fact, actually, Mike Wallace and his grandson were there to watch the fight, and we pulled them into our area so that nothing would happen to him. And Mike was getting kind of old at the time, so we got Mike Wallace in there.
Now, I know you're not a big Reggie Jackson fan.
No, Reggie, I've only worked with him as an announcer, but Reggie had a habit of when Reggie wanted to go get a hot dog or something, he would just flip his headset off, and it would crash on the table. You didn't know, nobody would say, hey, Reggie's going off mic here. He would just pop the thing off, and it would go boom on the table. And the director would always, what the hell was that? And be like, Reggie's getting another hot dog. He'd never tell you, just drop it on a counter and take off. They had to get used to that. There was no way to stop it because there'd be a stage manager there, but they weren't paying attention to what Reggie was doing. So.
Right. And the stage manager sets everybody up, the order of everything, and running the show.
Yeah, the stage manager works more with the play-by-play person. Because they're keeping them on schedule. You know, if they're doing a drop-in commercial or something, or they're plugging the prime time, the stage manager talking to producer, and a producer will say, next break, hand them the the CBS primetime lineup for Tuesday or something. So, in between, he'd be saying, don't forget Tuesday night, there's this, the last episode or whatever. So the stage manager is constantly feeding things to the play-by-play guy to drop in. And there's statisticians there. So the statistician's always handing things to both of them saying, if Bob gets a hit here, this will be Bob's, 34th consecutive hit off this particular picture in the last 300 games. I mean, they don't just think that stuff up. There's some little guy sitting there handing them cards saying, Bill, if he does this, well, he didn't think of that. Somebody handed him a little, index card with that on there to tell him to say it.
Well, you've had a lot of experiences and a lot of good ones, right? I mean, when you look back, you're not doing it now. You have your own real estate business, but when you look back, it's got to be some wonderful memories.
It was fun to do. The travel gets really, really tedious because they screw up your flights when you're traveling to work as well as going somewhere for vacation, and you got to kind of make it up, So if I usually for NFL, you'd fly Friday night, set up on Saturday, and do a game on Sunday. But if they blew your Friday flight, you'd have to fly Saturday, which would shorten your setup. So you were just jamming like crazy because you have to get it all set up on Saturday because Sunday when you get there, producer and director want to start producing drop-ins. They want to, now that the truck is built and ready to go, they want to make stuff to drop into the game. And believe me, when they started to play football, was a sigh of relief for me because it means these knuckleheads had to stop trying to make drop-ins and just do the game. And that was fun. That was easy. For me, doing the game was easy. It's doing all these drop-ins with these video editing, all this other stuff they wanted to make. And half of it never made air anyway. So you'd be under pressure to make all this junk, and then it would never get on the air.
Well, listen, I'm glad you had the experience.
Oh, it was fun.
I'm glad you decided to join us for the Backyard Oasis podcast. David Murphy, thanks for being with us. Lots of fun, lots of memories, and I'm going to go try to steal some of your press passes. Maybe I can use them to get in somewhere. Who knows? Thanks a lot. Thanks for being with us for Backyard Oasis. This concludes today's podcast. We're always looking for new ideas, so feel free to reach out to Judy Raper, Associate Dean of Community Engagement at Greenfield Community College, at 413-775-1819. If you have an idea you'd love to share. Special thanks to the creators of Backyard Oasis, Denise Schwartz, Chad Fuller, Dennis Lee, and Christine Copeland. Have a great day.